Hey everybody, before we start today's episode, we just wanted to apologize for Chris's mic acting up, the growing pains of an intercontinental across many ponds podcast. Having said that, on with the show. Hey, welcome to Beyond Narratives, and welcome to our second episode. I've got my ever-vigilant co-host Chris Nonis here from Down Under, and I'm Al, straight out of NYC, the ever-hardcore leftist. Combined, we are Beyond Narratives, the podcast that combats the CIA-MI6 propaganda matrix and gives you a viewpoint you won't get anywhere else. We'll also tackle stories that emanate from the nexus of the culture wars, finance, tech, and of course, politics. So let's get started. Chris, what's on your mind this week?
Good morning, everyone. I got one word on my mind, I think, and that's going to dominate our conversation today. And that word is Karen.
All right.
So these shitlibs' latest attack on Substack. Do you know what I'm talking about, Al?
Oh, yeah. They're basically getting pissed off that, journalists can now just go run roughshod and express their thoughts without corporate sensitivity training and basically censorship.
That's right. So there's this one particular Karen professor who got her panties up in a bunch over the likes of Greenwald and Taibbi disrupting the traditional gatekeepers of information and content manufacturers via Substack. Now, I can think of two major reasons as to why Substack is so dangerous to the gatekeepers and their useful idiots. Any platform that allows you to freely express your opinion and present you with facts that go beyond the narratives are dangerous to these massive victims with the cardigans and seat warmers. And we can now see how invested these people are in trying to limit the public discourse on such forums. But as you know, there's another major thing about Substack that poses a real danger. That is their business model. It's all fine and dandy when these services are free, but when you see these brilliant long-form investigative journalists like Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, starting to have serious subscribers on these forums while not being subjected to the traditional corporate constraints, suddenly you see this boutique left taking issues with it. Do you see the irony in all this? I thought these people hate corporatism. Did that ship suddenly sail or something else?
Well, the thing is, if you look at who's actually saying stuff about this, right, it's generally either these academics, like there was this professor, right, who you're talking about over here?
Yeah, Professor Dr. Sarah T. Roberts. And I can tell you right now, I mean, she looks every bit like what I think she would. Right. I mean, this is a gift that he keeps on giving. I mean, when I saw this Twitter tirade from her, I had to Google her up, and as soon as I saw a picture of hers, like in Google Images, I just giggled.
Well, it's also the academic part of it, right? I mean, they generally are more aligned with like corporate talking points. They're not, I mean, you can't really be like a tenured professor if you're going to be, I mean, even Cornel West didn't get tenure at Harvard, right? Because of his outspoken views. So they usually fall in line, like in bootlicking fashion, to all this stuff. And I'm not surprised at all. I mean, but the thing is, it's just they're using this token sample to sort of make it look like it's some kind of organic, like grassroots, like real academic pontification and research done on like how all this is so bad. But at the end of the day, it's like everybody knows it's complete bullshit.
So let's get into this Twitter thread by Dr. Roberts. So she starts off the thread by saying Substack is a dangerous and direct threat. Sorry, I should read like her, but I think I'm going to butcher it. So I'll just stick to myself. Substack is a dangerous and a direct threat to traditional media. But more importantly, tada, it's a threat to journalism. Great, you say journalism needs to be disrupted, but there is a problem. Journalists make their name doing reporting. This is governed by the norms and practices and by ethics. Flawed and not always achieved, true, but present and guiding what news streams do in every way, yes. So, okay, so basically, she draws the usual shit-lip clause out. We see this time and time and again. She does the whole, yes, I can identify with the pros and cons because I've done my research. I know it all. I've covered all my bases angle there. And you often see this style of writing in Vox and the Law. They start off by trying to show that, yeah, that's right. Yeah, they start off by trying to show that they got every angle. They have, they have all studied the Rashomon effect. So before they shove their shit-lip narrative down your throat, they have to give out that disclaimer about how they are aware of, their own critiques. So for those who don't know what Rashomon effect is, you heard of this term, Al?
No. Interesting.
Actually, I did. This is one of those terms that they teach you very early in journalism schools, and also sometimes in film studies, because the original meaning is tied to the notorious unreliability of eyewitnesses. The word Rashomon is actually a title of a Japanese movie from the 1950s. In that film, it's known for a plot device that involves various characters providing subjective, alternative, self-serving, and contradictory versions of the same incident. But in journalism, this is sort of co-opted to mean that when you cover a story, you have your biases, you have your biases influencing the narrative. So, of course, you see people like Dr. Sarah T. Roberts putting out this eye-rolling disclaimer about from an early on to let us all peasants know that she's not a sheep as we think she is because she knows she's about to embark on defending the corporate media model. So she has to have that base covered.
Right.
So, I've looked I've looked her up and some of her work. And the first thing that came to my mind was, I don't feel, freely toss around terms like white privilege, but if there was ever a good situation to do so, this would be it. I mean, white privilege literally is people like Dr. Roberts being the voice of authority to masses. And she is, and because, her work gets a lot of attention. Anyway, getting back. Okay, so she goes on to say that, flawed and not always achieved true. So that's very Karen-esque of her, I must say. I mean, and then as predicted, she goes on with this pretty bourgeoisie word salad about, without sparing any pomposity. Spare me your pomposity. You know where I got that from?
I think you're going to tell me. I know, but why don't you let the audience know?
Megatron. Shout out to Transformers Generation 1 because, bro, I mean, if you think my English is bad now, you should have, met me before I was introduced to Transformers in the late 80s.
Well, who says capitalism didn't do a good thing, right?
Yeah, exactly, man. Right to that. So, I think you told me that Glenn Greenwald has also responded to this Twitter tirade, but I think I'm going to mostly focus on Matt Taibbi because I subscribe to his email, so that's how I got to learn about this particular story. So, he calls a series of tweets a stolen valor argument. For anyone who doesn't know what that term means, stolen valor is a term that term for the behavior in it's a sort of a stolen valor is for military imposters. So individuals who lie about their military services. And to go off on a tangent here, I actually first learned about this from the Covington Catholic school drama because, when that Indian gentleman came with the drum and created that whole thing, I saw a lot of these boom accounts on Fox News saying, "Oh, he was never deployed. It's stolen valor." But and it turns out that the dude was in fact in the military repairing some fridges or some shit in the US itself. So he was never deployed. But I mean, who gives a fuck? He was still in the military, right? So it's not technically stolen valor. Not that I was, on board with that whole, attempt to ruin those kids' lives. I mean,
he wasn't. He was doing. He didn't do what Don Draper did, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And these kids were just having a band with a bunch of Black Hebrew Israelites who, mind you, are a designated hate group according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And also, I think one of them was responsible for the synagogue shooting in New York. So, you got this whole world upside down now, people supporting whoever they feel like. Whenever, if for whatever their partisan reason. So, anyway, that's my tangent about stolen valor. So, so this bitch has a stolen valor argument on Substack, as Matt Taibbi points out. And so the boutique left professor wants us to know that Marxism is great, but at the same time, corporatism is allowing her kind to weaponize the cancel culture in a way that traditional, Marxist media will never allow. So now she wants to tacitly stick up for the corporatisms. She's urging us to boycott, the crabs who managed to get out of the bucket, literally.
Yeah.
So her last tweet, she's urging us, please do not write or pay for Substack. Now the funny thing is, that's she
it's
pretty
like
much comes
like
out
the
and
Twitter, like this article was hacked. Like the moment you put something like that, people do the opposite.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, if you were to tell me that she's deliberately writing all this to create a Streisand effect, should I go on a tangent here and talk a little bit about Streisand effect? Or should we discuss the fact that Barbara Streisand did porn? Actually,
no tangent that would be.
No, actually, there are countless forums on the internet discussing whether this is true or whether it's an urban myth. So, I'll let you off the hook with that topic. So, anyway, Professor Roberts. So, Professor Roberts, if she deliberately wrote this because she knows that many of us despise Mark petty bourgeoisie demographic, and mind you, I come across a lot of these types of people on Facebook as well. I have, in fact, that girl I always talk to on Facebook, she used to constantly get into arguments with this type of a professor who writes giant essays with elegant language just to cover the Obama style narratives to cover up any kind of hypocrisy of the Democrats. So so I do know that this type of demographic actually exists. So somehow I doubted that she was actually doing this to play for some sort of reverse psychology. So I think I met enough of her kind to know that this is real, because tomorrow she'll be a caricature of herself from today. And this is what we have to deal with. I read Matt's email and I felt that he was being a little too defensive, if you know what I mean, having to explain how he and Glenn Greenwald had their roots in independent journalism and that they did not acquire these skills from traditional institutions.
Yeah, this is like some kind of liberal thing where, I mean, not even like the leftist thing that where they have to like either say they've had their roots in independent journalism or they're not Trump supporters, or before they say their main point. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah, I know. They go on a long disclaimer about, how they have this and that and how they're gay or whatever. And Glenn Greenwald did the same thing. I mean, I wish, especially Glenn Greenwald, he'd stop doing it. The other day, he had to spend 90% of his response to accusations of transphobia by making it about his personal circumstances. the way I look at it, the less time you spend explaining yourselves, the better. Do you think that these shitlibs really are going to, these shitlibs don't know any or all of this, and that they will even change the course of their trajectory because you invest in a well-articulated explanation about all this? Guy, please just stop it.
Yep.
I mean, they see it as a weakness, and they get a certain sense of high from seeing you pause your good work and go on a loop, having to justify everything. What they fear the most is what you do best. So don't take a break from it. Just, I mean, who gives a fuck what they call you? Just let them eat a dick. So,
yeah, but then that's going to be like you're violent.
That's violence.
I think they're falling for that problem where AOC and the freaking controlled opposition will pop out of nowhere and they'll get on a tirade. Even this Neera Tanden thing, right? Like, it's against women of color. They'll always try to move the goalposts around, and I think that's what's causing these people to sort of start doing this defensive tactic first. Like I said in our last episode, we don't need to tell anybody what we think about Trump. All right. And in fact, someone asked me who I was, and I said, like, doesn't matter who I am, just listen to what I'm saying. And if you like it, great. You don't like it, well, you said eat a dick. So
yeah, exactly. We don't need to actually spend too much time explaining all these. I mean, if they are using this tactic to shut you down, then whatever you're saying is working. You should just continue to keep moving forward, not stop. Not take a break to talk about how your friend is that your whatever. I mean, believe what you want to. I mean, because at the end of the day, tying it back to this story, does it even matter if you got your if your roots were in independent media? I mean, what if you picked up your writing skills from corporate media? You can still hone your skills and divest from corporate media and reinvent yourself. And I think when people like Matt and Glenn spend too much time talking about their own anecdotal stories about how they didn't get their writing skills from corporate media, they're sort of at the same time doing a disservice to people who actually have gotten their skills and moved on and reinvented themselves. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to actually have to explain to anyone that about your anecdotal stories, because the people you are explaining to, these people have no principles. They flip-flop all the time, and they write all these word salads to influence people to stick to whatever the narrative that fits their tribe.
That's right.
So Taibbi goes on to say, primary reason audiences are moving to places like Substack, the perception that the traditional news outlets have become tools of every corporate and political interest they're supposed to be overseeing. So yes, I mean, you can clearly see, right? Even with the New York Times, they become the tools for the Democratic Party, and they become the tools for all the corporations that support the Democratic Party.
Well, it's obvious because, I mean, the corporations are now, there used to be 200 media companies in 1996. And then after Bill Clinton signed the 1996 Telecommunications Act, now we have 6, and they're all they're all the PR arms of various oligarchs. That's all they are. They couldn't even try to be oppositional if they wanted to.
Yeah, the same thing can be told about in Australia. We used to have a rule where I think that one person cannot own several different arms of the media. So if you own a TV or radio station, I think you were prohibited from owning a newspaper or something like that.
They got rid of all of that.
Yeah, John Howard, he got rid of that law, if I'm not mistaken. So Taibbi also writes, why didn't Snowden go to one of the big names like Times? Could it be because one of the senior Times editors back then, Dean, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Yeah. Dean Beckett. Yeah, it sounds like something you eat at a pastry shop here. Now the chief reportedly once killed a whistleblower story without a surveillance arrangement between AT&T and NSA, or because the Times had a history of sitting on damaging intelligence stories, including one about an analyst who doubted the existence of the Iraqi WMDs, that the paper held until after the 2003 invasion.
Oh yeah,
you know about this?
They did so many things. They even held back on a lot of the stuff till Bush won re-election. This is supposed liberal paper, right? They held back on stuff before the election so that Bush could win, and no one would talk about this invasion being a complete F-up, right? And the NSC AT&T story came out like 2 or 3 or 4 years before. I think it finally got unveiled in 2005 or 6. And you know, at that point, it's funny. At that point, everyone was like, "Oh my God, they're spying on Americans! How could this happen to our elite asses?" And guess what? Now we have like literally like your digital fingerprints everywhere. There's no way you can get out, and it's like become a way of life. Look at how much, based on these media companies, all lockstep with their, you know, oligarchical owners, they're all pushed this narrative all the way to this side, where all this stuff about, you know, things coming out for surveillance, like nobody even makes. I mean, a lot of people even think that Snowden. You know, I'm going to be talking about Neera next, but I'll bring this back at that point about Snowden and Neera. But let's continue.
Yeah, and the sad part is that there's so many people who identify as leftists or socialists who are now okay with all this mass surveillance for whatever. I mean, and if you bring it up,
this is DSA stuff. Yeah. DSA is like
but that's the thing that I'm talking about self-identified socialists. Which is sort of the same as the boutique left, if you know what I mean. So. I mean, that's what they like to identify themselves. But at the same time, they're all right with all these new mass surveillances because, hey, you know, you're hurting Trump supporters. That's just how they think.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, Taibbi writes, a new approach symbolized by a Times column 4 years ago called Trump is Testing the Norms of Objectivity in Journalism stresses choosing and presenting information in such a way as to ensure that audience makes the correct political decisions with news they are given. The fear there is more about impact. Are people taking the news the right way? So how often do we hear about journalists, academics, etc., fired from being independent thinkers, Dr. Roberts? So
never.
Yeah, exactly. When Glenn wanted to do a story about censorship of the New York Post exposing Hunter Biden, he was suppressed, you know, from all around. Like
me, suppressed by his own outlet, like
exactly.
Made sure he didn't publish that.
Yeah, Matt writes, like me, he didn't think the story itself was necessarily that important, but the suppression of it was. He was told by the editor, Betsy Reed, that even if the story didn't represent something untoward about Biden, the word represent a tiny fraction of the sleaze and lies Trump and his cronies are oozing in every day. In other words, in order for a story about Biden to be newsworthy, it had to meet a bizarre worseness standard vis-a-vis Donald Trump.
Yeah, because I mean, the funny thing is, Trump always has to play the villain, right? That's their number one goal. So you can't have anyone being as bad as Trump or worse, because then that flips the script. Because you can only have, like, he's Skeletor and everyone else is He-Man or whatever, right? So the even this Cuomo thing, have you noticed? Like if Trump, like even till today, Trump's not even around, and I've seen press conferences and interviews with, you know, journalists and all these people still crowing about him, man, like he's in the next room or something. So the thing is, I think that's their golden ticket. They'll never get rid of Trump, and for Biden to be, I don't even think they were going after Glenn. They just didn't want anything bad about Biden out there at all, and they didn't realize by suppressing it, it's like the Streisand effect. Then you gather more interest in the story. So
yeah, and there you have it. I mean, we can't speak the truth because the truth can somehow impact the broad narrative. We should be selective of what people ought to learn, because more truth you tell, more damage, and it can be for our cause. And actually, here you go. There's another tangent, because as soon as I said the more truth you tell, suddenly I have a flash of this film, The Insider. Have you ever seen it?
I have it on my list. You told me about it last month.
Oh yeah, you should.
Yeah.
You
I've
should
had it forever.
definitely.
I just haven't gotten around to watching it.
Yeah, I mean, you really should. It's based on real life events. I think I've told you about this, and for anyone who knows me personally, this is an eye roll moment for them because I can't shut up about this movie. And those who don't know are probably eye rolling too because I'm going off on a tangent here. But the movie is about the journalistic integrity surrounding a smear campaign against a big tobacco whistleblower, brilliantly played by Russell Crowe. In the film, 60 Minutes journalist Lowell Bergman, played by Al Pacino, tells his CBS colleagues, including Mike Wallace, played by Christopher Plummer. Shout out to Christopher Plummer, R.I.P. Captain, handsome Wont Trap, from Sound of Music, who banged a hot nun. Anyway, I must say that, after hearing about Plummer's death, I decided to watch Sound of Music with my daughters, and man, that I should have done that a long time ago.
55 years too late, but it's okay.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Anyway, Al Pacino's character tells his colleague that the reason the CBS is pressured to drop the segment on the whistleblower is not because he's not telling the truth, precisely because he is telling the truth. And the more truth you tell, the more damage it makes. And that's exactly why people like Dr. Roberts wants to discourage people from doing good work on places like Substack, because the information has to be carefully plotted and tuned in a way that the truth will not harm the image of the party she supports or any of or her circle. The only truth that's worth speaking are the truths that advance the interests of her party and her stooges. And they go about this very shamelessly too. Either that they are shameless or they are too arrogant to know that people can't see through it. They think that just because they have all these blue check marks and qualifications, somehow their word salads are going to cleverly disguise the most basic of, partial tribal instincts. Perhaps they don't see how blatantly shallow they are. They seem surrounded by their smart, coastally writing skills and their vocabularies. Sure, there are some Karens who will read this and think that this is a strong woman, and they'll pat each other on the back. But anyone with a half a brain can see that this is just a desperate attempt to hang on to some status quo, the very status quo they pretend to challenge. And there lies the irony.
Yeah, and it's also because it's about keeping up with that lifestyle. You're not gonna. If you really want to fight for what you believe in, you got to be prepared to lose everything you've gained by doing the exact opposite, which is what this woman has been up to, right? Yeah. There's no way she would have been anywhere near like this kind of, she wouldn't. I feel like in a way, like I have no proof, obviously, but it always seems to be like these guys, they're the academic arm of the media industrial complex. They'll funnel all the shit out. The PR agencies will go all the schools and colleges is where it all starts, right? I mean, where like just recently, I still have to watch the video where Dr. Cornel West talks about Harvard denying him tenure. And I mean, it's funny because I think he's a tenured professor at Princeton, isn't he?
I think something like this. Look, I'd be lying if I just go along with it because I haven't done a lot of. I always thought he was from Cornell for some reason.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. Yeah. So,
but I just recently heard last week that he got denied tenure at Harvard. So it's because at the end of the day he's a complete socialist in a lot of ways. At least he preaches
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
So,
exactly.
But I think that's bad enough. So, and kind of looping back to socialism, and, I just before we came on here, I just heard that Biden has lowered the limits for getting the check.
Oh, okay. Yes, you told me
so he's moved
about
it down to 80,000 now.
Okay.
It's like they pretend that people who were making over 80,000 a year ago who were employed then are in a better position now. That means this guy's going to give less money to people than Trump did.
Because, people who make 80,000 or more, they are terrible people who have no grievances. They don't have bills to pay. They don't have
You
struggles.
won't
They were
believe
not
the
affected by
excuse. You won't believe the excuse.
Yeah.
Guess what the excuse is? To gain moderate support amongst Republicans and freaking Manchin and Sinema. Who's president, man? Manchin or Biden? And this is their bullshit, right? This is what they do every single time since the 90s. Oh, the Republicans and shit libs, liberals, anyone to the left of extreme right, they always believe this garbage. It's like, this play acting is getting so tiring, man. Like they can't do anything. It's the Republicans and it's Manchin and it's Sinema. We have to. First of all, you guys, Republicans who are much more conservative were able to pass 1,200, right, and $100,000 limit just like that. They're supposedly worse than you. How the hell did they manage to do it, right? So that's the one bullshit thing about this, and after this week, like yesterday, the only good thing that came out in 2021, which was better than 2020, is the crashing and burning of Neera Tanden, right? She finally dropped the ball.
Should we pop a champagne cork or something? You got that special effect?
It's gonna be worse. He's gonna stick her into a worse position inside the White House with no oversight, and she's gonna be around. He himself said in his own letter, in the letter where he accepts her dropping out of the race, he says, "I can't wait to have you in my administration," and they're lying when he actually says that he thought putting her in that position was an overture to the left. She's like the biggest troll against the left.
Whatever gave him that idea that she's somehow a representative.
Oh, he's lying. He's bullshit. He knows his bullshit.
Is it because she's a woman of color?
That's the latest. There's a whole K-Hive bot army on Twitter right now just going after people for how dare you. Yeah, and they've actually made it about anti-Semitism. They're already saying that it's Bernie Sanders who orchestrated this from behind the scenes. And
so how is that anti-Semitism? He's a Jewish.
It's basically anti-Semitic to Bernie Sanders, right?
Yeah, and how the hell can this woman be? If we speak of the left, have you seen some of the tweets by her or her surrogates that was specifically aimed at the left? How did Biden ever come to the conclusion that this woman will somehow be, a representative for the left? There is this whole. I saw this whole Matt and Katie Helper. They did a whole episode on Neera Tanden, and they read some of the tweets that she has put out. And there's this bloke by the name of I can't remember. I think her name is Jeremy. Yeah, so Jeremy, that's the guy. And literally she has actually. She calls him an asset publicly. And some of the tweets that this guy has put out. I don't know what to make of it. To be honest, I had a good laugh at it because they were sort of, right up there. And there was a lot of dick sucking in these tweets. Every second tweet is like, they point at some leftist like Bernie or whatever, and they just tell him to suck my dick. Wow. There's just like a lot of dick sucking with these bitches, right? But yeah, and they were questioning her, right, at the Congress, and there was this who was she meant to be? She was meant to be the management.
She was going to be the Office of Management and Budget, so she was going to be in charge of the United States budget.
So for those who don't know much about Neera Tanden, she is the director of American.
She was the president of the Center for American Progress.
She was a Center for American Progress, which was a think tank, and
quote unquote. It's a think tank that was set up by John Podesta. So it's basically a Clinton machine. And I've actually interacted with a person from CAP, right? Years ago, they wanted someone to work in their IT department. And I was talking to one of the head guys out there. And it was all going well. And this is, I think, around that time, the same year I found out about Neera Tanden. This is like 2013. I think that's when she became president, right? And he said, how many words, 5 or 10 words to me that completely eviscerated any enthusiasm I had for that job. This is what he said to me. He said, Edward Snowden is a traitor.
Wow.
And that was a line of thinking amongst CAP. So what I'm trying to get at is like her organization is basically a money funneling machine for the Clintons, right? They basically take money from UAE, Saudi Arabia. They've gone against the minimum wage. She's put down her own union. She closed down the Think Progress blog when they wanted to unionize. And Faiz Shakir, who was Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, she actually attacked him, like, physically. But how come there's no nothing about, like, violence there? Where's the AOC at? Like.
And that's the danger of these think tanks too, because now they are sort of putting a layer between the parties and candidates and big corporations, because they have mastered this art of funneling money that makes them look like everything that their donations are coming from just causes, which is we touched on this topic in our previous episode lightly. People like Bloomberg. So anyway, getting back to Neera Tanden, she's also awful on policy, right? I mean, they say that's
but that's the irony is she didn't get nailed for that. She got nailed for mean tweets.
That's
so
right.
Basically, here's the thing, right? So someone asked me this today, that how come Trump was allowed to get away with it? Well, guess what? Trump didn't need the approval of the higher ups in the Senate and the House or the Senate to get approved as president. He got voted in, right? So he didn't need to give a shit about whether he's being nice to them. She needed approval by the Senate to get in, and she did the only criminal thing they consider horrible, going against civility, which is the same thing with the Capitol riots on January 6th. It was against civility. Have you noticed how much they've got their ducks in a row when it comes to that stuff? The army's still there till the end of the year for some reason, right? Because when they're threatened, it's more like, and so they sunk her not because she was bad on policy where she wanted to steal the oil in Libya or anything like that,
Yeah, I mean, that's what's frustrating, the fact that they're so good at getting their ducks in a row. I mean, she has a video, Neera Tanden, she has a video out there saying that she's excited about cutting Social Security. She said not to sweat the minimum wage. She said she wanted U.S. to take the oil from Libya to pay for local programs here to avoid deficits. She spent the entire primary asking Bernie to disavow and repudiate anyone who said anything obnoxious on the internet, which is
right. I remember that.
Which is the funniest thing. And there's of course now you get to see. But what's equally annoying is that when I saw this hearing, we saw people like Lindsey Graham questioning her, and he was asking her, "Did you mean it when you said them?" And I mean, like,
oh, that was Kennedy.
I mean, oh, actually, yeah, that was actually, yeah. So and that's the thing, that we kind of do need to go beyond the narrative here a bit to point out that the Republican senator is being butthurt about tweets is also pure hypocrisy, because Trump's conduct over the years.
They both do it. Both parties are just always so hypocritical, and it's an act when a normal human being couldn't really. That's why only the scummiest of people become politicians. You have to be a complete psychopath to be a politician. I mean, you're not going to get in. I spoke to someone the other day, and he told me he was going to be a politician, and I was like, man, I could literally see traces of. All right, I think you'll be a good politician, because I can see, you won't be a good politician, and you might be a better human being if you are a better human being, because you won't be able to pierce that blob that keeps them all together in their little shit bubble, where they can just continue being this way. Because normal human beings, like if I were to say something today and completely deny it tomorrow and do it at work or something like that, people will be like, are you kidding me? But they can do it like it's like nothing, because it's completely orchestrated.
Yeah, I mean, they were competing for the obnoxious Twitter space. But to Trump's credit, though, and quote unquote credit, Neera Tanden was never as funny or entertaining as Trump.
Oh, no, she was just annoying. Yeah. And it's funny how they fought for her, right? So that someone's gonna go down when the White House was like, oh, we're gonna fight to the death for her. Psaki was asked yesterday about this 2 days ago, and she gave like a really smug answer. Let me play the clip for you.
On the parliamentarian decision, you said that he respects that decision, but progressives don't understand this. In some respect, they're like, why not fight for this? So why is the White House not more aggressively challenging that and sending the vice president to try and potentially overrule that with the vote?
Well, the decision for the vice president to vote to overrule or to take a step to overrule is not a simple decision. It would also require 50 votes. As you know, it's not a one-step decision. And the president and the vice president both respect the history of the Senate. They are both formally served in the Senate, and that's not an action we intend to take. But the president is committed to raising the minimum wage, to working to determine the best vehicle forward to doing that. That's why he put it in the package. He wants it to be raised to $15 an hour, and he will be in touch with leaders from all wings of the party in determining the best path forward for that. Go ahead, Jeff.
A follow-up to Jeff's question, which strikes me. The White House doesn't have 50 votes to confirm Neera Tanden as OMB Director, and yet we heard from the White House Chief of Staff say that the White House, they're going to fight our guts out was the phrase he used, to get her confirmed. So why push for that and not push as hard, one could say, for raising the minimum wage? You could make the argument that the American people stand to benefit more from a higher wage than they would from a chosen OMB director.
Well, I think that's mixing a few things kind of irresponsibly, if I'm just being totally honest. I would say on the minimum wage, the president included a raise of the minimum wage in his package because he felt strongly that it's long overdue, that men and women working hard, trying to make ends meet, shouldn't be living at the poverty level. That's why he put it in his package. There is a process that it goes through, a parliamentary process, when it's a reconciliation bill, as you know. But for people who haven't been following all the nitty-gritty of this, because it's a budgetary bill, that's why it went through the process. And, again, I would send you to talk to leaders in Congress to see if they have the 50 votes necessary. But regardless, the president, the vice president have made the decision they're not going to move forward with that step. But also, it's not a simple process. It requires two steps. As it relates to Neera Tanden, she is somebody who has decades of experience. She is qualified. She is prepared to lead the budget team. And we're continue, of course, to fight for the confirmation of every nominee that the president puts forward. We'll see if we have 50 votes. That's part of the journey. That's part of democracy in action.
Yeah, so typical politician propagandizing. They knew Neera was down and out, and yet they were fronting all the way to the very end. Michael Tracy actually had a really good tweet about that. He said the new Democratic administration will burn a huge amount of political capital during the first 100 days. Crusading at all costs to get Neera Tanden through the Senate confirmation would have been intentionally a ridiculous online left meme joke just a year ago. Because that's why I feel like Biden's lying, because he knows she's kryptonite to the left. She's not left. She's right. She's right winger.
Oh, well said. Definitely well said.
You know.
So I mean, and the other thing was that so I was watching these hearings and I couldn't help laugh my ass off when I saw this GOP senator to Neera Sanders. You call Senator Sanders everything but an ignorant slut. And
that
then
was
he had to go on.
Painful joke. I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah.
What
what was hilarious about that was that we saw Bernie Sanders sitting there taking taking no issue. He probably had his mask and his mittens on, and that's right, because the sad thing is he would have voted for this bitch. I mean, he's such a cuck. He only gets angry when people that shit libs permit him to be angry with. When shit libs say, Bernie, you gotta. You got our blessings to attack, the list of people from this list. Then you see this beady-eyed old man suddenly flapping his hands like a featherless chicken. Yeah. Trump is a crook. The Capitol Hill is sacred, and I love Sandinistas who I got killed, from the made in Vermont Gatling guns. Yeah, I mean.
But the thing is, if you think about it, right? Remember what Chris had just said. He said that Bernie does not want to end up like Ralph Nader, right? He belongs in that little club. He's been there for I think he's been in the House and Senate for 30 plus years, right? This is all he knows. I mean, he would cease to exist on his own. I mean, we know it's not even the money. It's not like he's the poorest senator, the poorest everything, right? He doesn't take any money from anyone, but he's still part of that club. If he were to go against them, he would be ostracized. They would. I mean, come on. They were trying to at some point they were trying to kick out these other Josh Hawley and all for just pumping their fist. When the Capitol Hill riot happened, you had this new freshman House member. I forget her name. She was the Black Lives Matter girl. from Georgia, who just won her election. Was she from Georgia? I keep forgetting. She's along with the two new freshman House members. She had this draft bill ready to go, where she said that, all right, hey, you know what? If you just showing support or not saying anything.
Oh, Bush, right? Cory
Bush, yeah. So Cory Bush had like a freaking draft text ready. Like, it's literally like, I'm pretty sure it was on the back burner for like a complete event, quote unquote, like this. In fact, irony of this event is I just read today that the FBI admitted there was not a single weapon found in the entire Capitol riot mob. They keep calling it an armed insurrection. There were no arms.
You can spot a whale when you see it. I mean, and I don't mean a whale about her appearance by any means. I'm just talking about the fact that, a fat cat, the corrupt, the cronies, the people who are going to go on to, just quietly marinate with all these perks and corruption. You can spot those kind of people a mile away, and she's definitely one in the making. You can tell right off the bat. Yeah.
She was one of those women who Hillary said, go, why don't you go run for office then, Okay. So, it's funny how they start so earnestly and then they end up being Pelosi's bitch. So, and it just goes to show you I mean, to give them the benefit of the doubt, not that I do, but I'm just saying to play devil's advocate, imagine what a force they're entering into, that if even the people with the most earnest, beginnings, where BLM and like we're fighting for social justice and stuff, like they get in there and they immediately kowtow to Pelosi of all people. They lose all their fangs and they're literally just become tweeters like day and night.
Oh, these women have so much power. Remember how Rashida Tlaib, her joke didn't land well. She wanted to boo Hillary Clinton, and she came off with such a dry way as well. But at least she took a stand. She did, okay, I'm going to boo him, and she did boo, okay, and it flopped. But then the very next day, she came on Twitter and completely cucked, and I was like, I'm sorry, Hillary Clinton. Right? Yeah, so. That's right. It just tells you the story, and this is and that's why exactly that these people, these so-called, they talk about revolution, as if they got it in their blood to have a revolution. But what's funny is that they don't. I mean, the only type of revolution that they seem to support are the ones that fundamentally change nothing and allowing a lot of people to just die in the process. So there you go. I mean, I was reading a Terry Pratchett book yesterday, and he was sort of mocking these types of phony revolutionaries in his book. He probably had some insight that from years ago.
Not just that. Think about it this way, right? I mean, as earnest as maybe even AOC ever wanted to be, right? Okay, and I'm not putting down where she came from, what she did. We're just talking about class and positional, like, structures of power, right? So when you're, like, a bartender who just became a congresswoman and you are now in front of this 45, 50-year-old veteran of, like, money politics who's literally, like, the epitome of greed and power and has all her ducks in a row, what are you going to do to threaten her? When you had that one shot, you failed. And now she's actually calling for people to petition Kamala, in other words, Kamala Harris, to overrule the parliamentarian, right? Now, that's the excuse they're using for not passing the $15 minimum wage, right? This bullshit. Mm-hmm. I mean, like every time the parliamentarians got involved in things like tax cuts and stuff, the GOP just flicked them away and put in a parliamentarian that agrees with them. That's all they could have done. And now she's doing a petition. She should be using her House power along with her caucus, this fake progressive caucus that's 100 people strong. I mean, I wonder if any of them are effective. And now they've done a petition online to force Kamala to please overrule the parliamentarian. I mean, this is just like optically just for show. There's no real substance behind it. And then people will be like, oh, see, AOC tried. She did a petition. Don't they know how Congress freaking works?
Exactly. And also I would, before I forget, I want to mention that one of Neera Tanden's buddies, Jeremy, he had a tweet out, and this one's a winner. You got to listen to this one. So, Linda Sarsour, who's a Palestinian American, not my, I'm not exactly a biggest fan, but she's apparently good at organizing shit and all. And Linda Sarsour had a tweet put out when that synagogue shooting happened. So she was expressing her condolences. And apparently this guy replied to her saying, "Oh, look, Linda Sarsour is pretending to be sad about the shooting." Because, it's just like this assumption that because she's a Palestinian, so she must be a terrorist. Not that I'm, like I would have to reiterate that Linda Sarsour. Exactly. I mean, she's one of those Farrakhan girls. So there is always that. But so I mean, these are the type of people we have to deal with. She has quite a circle of friends, and he's not the only guy. And if it's like the only guy, we can, we can make a case about it. But there's a whole range of tweets that put out by her, well-known surrogates, not like loosely related, but her close inner circle. And I think I definitely recommend that Katie and Matt's podcast on Neera Tanden from last week if you want a good chuckle. You see Katie doing a pretty good job reading out all those tweets, and it's just funny coming from her.
There's a bright side to this. Biden was willing to give away the store to get Murkowski to vote for Neera Tanden, right? What I mean by that was he was willing to change climate policy to allow Alaska to probably go over its drilling and all the pollution limits that she wants, because she's like the number one benefactor to her is oil and gas, and she's from an oil and gas state. And I'm funny that how they were, if you think about it, they're Democrats who are trying to appeal to a Republican. They have their own Republican Democratic senator in Manchin, but they didn't even go near him. So it's funny how they go to the Republicans first to cut deals to get votes for this ghoul, but they won't go to Manchin, who is supposedly in their party. But all they needed to get was Sinema and Manchin aboard, and they've got the votes with Kamala, and of course Bernie's going to go along, the cuck that he is. But they went to Murkowski, and and I guess as bad as they wanted the vote, they weren't able to bribe her enough. So she probably wanted, full GOP level, Democratic level governing would be 99% of the laws that the GOP won, but the GOP wanted 100, so they didn't get it. And that's why the reason she fell through is because Murkowski wasn't going to give the vote. So that's why the nomination didn't go through.
Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, that tells you the whole story. You were telling me about it, how important it was that they wanted to get this vote from the GOP senator for it. And because they are all in the same club. I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, but the guy who's in their club, I'm surprised they didn't reach out to him, Manchin and Sinema. I mean, they're in the majority with Kamala, right? So they don't need Republicans. But even then even this stimulus check for $1,400, the lying $2,000, right? They're still he's saying that I want to appeal to moderate Republicans. That's why I'm lowering it to 80,000. I'm surprised that Republicans never lowered it to 80,000. Why the hell would you do it? Because he's worse than a Republican. He's a freaking criminal, man. And people are going to find out the more we get. It's only been a month, and he's already in the, it's just going to be insane. I'm sure he can't screw up as much as Trump did in terms of the COVID relief, but anything's possible with Biden. I mean, I think Texas opened up the state today. No masks at all.
Oh, yeah, I saw the governor, whatever his name is, touting about it. Yes, no mask, nothing. It just sounds like, your typical Texan, we love code and guns and beef and whatever.
He just went through a freaking snowstorm where they didn't have power. What is he talking about?
Yeah, I know. Instead of learning from their mistakes, they just double down on these meaningless platitudes.
Yeah. Well... So that's our show today. We covered the Neera Tanden implosion, the best thing that happened in 2021. Let's hope better things happen, and we'll probably see her come back around like freaking, like a bad Matrix.
They don't go away. They don't go away. But what they do is they always reappear in someone's administration. I mean, it could be even a GOP administration. I remember one of this. I was some author was saying when he had all these hopes about Obama, but when he saw the people in his administration who have already been serving the presidents before him for 3 decades, his heart just sank. So this is just what it is. This is the ever revolving door. These people don't go away. They just reappear somewhere else and continue to make an enormous killing.
Damn straight.
Offering their expertise.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, I just want to. I think I want to, before we end this episode, I actually do want to touch on something, and it goes back to our first story about this professor who attacked the Substack, and ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see more and more of dissenting voices being silenced, and the worst part about it is that people who used to support left-wing causes, people who actually had rational ideas in the past, they themselves have actually bought into this narrative that these voices need to be silenced. And I want to end with a quote from Noam Chomsky, just to let you people know. And Noam Chomsky himself has, I must say, I've been a little disappointed from time to time. He himself sometimes gets pinned down with narratives, but this quote is an eye opener. But I think, and it will stand the test of time. And he once said, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow a very lively debate within that spectrum. Even encourage the more critical and dissident views. That gives the people the sense that there's free thinking going on, while all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of the debate." And I think this is such a great quote, but at the same time, more as we start to see glitches in the matrix, you're going to see more and more control measures. So right now, that spectrum in itself is getting kind of narrower, because now we are sort of at a situation where we are forced to the only type of debate that's allowed is the debate that serves the interests of one particular political party in America. And we are starting to see very clearly. I mean, back in the day, you might have thought that this is conspiratorial because people can say whatever they want. But as you can see more and more cancel culture happening, more and more people being deplatformed, you are starting to see very real. You're starting to witness or firsthand how this spectrum is controlled and the narratives are controlled. So I hope you actually put away your tribal instinct and your partisanships and your biases, and sort of think a little bit about what we're saying here, because this stuff is important. It may not impact you today, but it may impact the people you dislike, in fact. So you might enjoy it, but tomorrow it might come to bite you in the ass. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think they started that with it all started with Alex Jones initially, and everyone was like dancing on his grave, but they didn't sort of get that. I think what they've done is like you said, they've made the Overton window so small. They've just kept it on a certain spectrum, and that's where you talk and that's where you do all this stuff, and everything around it is bad, and it must be canceled completely. That's why on this podcast we make sure we smash that goddamn matrix glitch as well as the Overton window, and we make sure you see the whole entire spectrum as we go beyond the narratives every week. We're going to be back on Saturday, which is probably going to be March 6th, so hope you tune in then. Until next time, peace out.
Peace out. Yeah, take care.